You know, the book of Genesis, it has some of the most famous stories ever told, right? But let's be honest, it's also got some of the Bible's biggest, most head-scratching puzzles. So today, we're going to try and unlock a few of them together.
And I mean, really think about these questions for a second. A flood that covers the entire planet, a God who's all-powerful but somehow needs to rest, and how about death and predators in a world that God himself called very good? These aren't small details. These are the kinds of questions that have sparked debates for, like, centuries.
But here's a wild thought. What if the key to cracking Genesis isn't actually in Genesis? What if the answers have been hiding in plain sight in one of the Bible's oldest books? Well, that's exactly what we're going to get into today. We're going to see how the book of Job offers this really surprising lens that might just solve these ancient puzzles.
All right, let's dive right in with the big one, Noah's flood. Was it this massive, global, world-ending event? I mean, the story definitely makes it sound that way, doesn't it? But the Bible itself might be telling a much more nuanced story.
Okay, so this is the verse everybody brings up, right? All the high mountains under the entire heavens were covered. Seems totally clear. Planet-wide flood. Case closed. But what if it's not that simple?
Because, check this out, we've got this passage from Psalm 104, and it says that way back during Creation Week, God set a permanent boundary for the oceans, a line they can never again cross to cover the whole earth. Now, since this promise was made before Noah, well, that seems to fly right in the face of a global flood, doesn't it?
So how do we square this circle? Well, it might all come down to perspective. See, the New Testament says the flood was meant to judge the world of the ungodly. And at that point in history, humanity was probably all living in one general area, not spread across the globe. So a flood that was worldwide, from their point of view, wouldn't have to be literally planet-wide. And that phrase, under the entire heavens, in ancient language, that could just mean from horizon to horizon, as far as you can see. And that idea fits perfectly with that earlier promise that the oceans wouldn't cover the entire planet.
You see how powerful this is? Just re-examining the text in its own context. And this same tool can help us with other puzzles in Genesis. Sometimes it all comes down to the original meaning of just one single word.
Like, take God resting on the seventh day. Are we really supposed to think that an all-powerful God got tired? No way. The Hebrew word used for rest there doesn't mean he needed to catch his breath. It just means he stopped what he was doing. It means a cessation of activity. I love the analogy here. It's like a rest in music. It's not because the musician is exhausted. It's a deliberate, meaningful pause in the creation. Here's another great one. The Hebrew word olam. We almost always translate it as forever. And that makes it sound like the universe is just going to last for all eternity. But olam can also just mean for a really, really long time, or into the distant future. And that one little shift completely changes how we read verses like Psalm 102, which says the heavens are actually going to perish and wear out like a garment. So the universe isn't eternal. It kind of has an expiration date.
Okay, so let's shift gears to what is maybe the toughest topic of all. It's a really emotional one. If God's creation was very good, how on earth could it have included things like predators and animal death before humans even sinned? I mean, that's a huge question, right? How can a very good world have lions tearing apart gazelles? It just feels wrong. It seems to go against everything we think about a loving creator. But this, right here, is where the book of Job becomes so incredibly important. Yeah, look at this. In the book of Job, it's not a prophet or a narrator talking. It's God himself describing the world he created. And what does he choose to highlight? He talks about how he provides prey for the lioness. He describes the hawk and the eagle and how their young feast on blood. He's not presenting this stuff as some horrible consequence of sin. He's talking about it like it's a fundamental part of his design. And this leads us to a really crucial distinction. The New Testament in Romans says that because of sin, death came to all people. Did you catch that? It's very specific, people. It doesn't say death came to all life or all living things, and that little detail opens up a whole new way of looking at this. Maybe animal death was always just part of the natural cycle, part of the ecosystem, but human death, that was the unique, tragic consequence of sin. So, okay, we've looked at the flood, God's rest, animal death. What's the common thread here? What's the method for untangling all this? Well, it really boils down to a pretty simple principle for working through these tough spots in the text. It's a simple two-step process, but it's incredibly powerful. First,
Don't just zero in on one verse and build your whole case on it. You have to integrate all of Scripture, look at what the entire Bible says about a subject. And second, use the really explicit, clear passages to help you understand the ones that are a little more, well, implicit or confusing. So if a passage in Genesis seems a bit fuzzy on animal death, let God's crystal clear description in Job be your guide. So what's the big takeaway from all this? The idea is that using the Bible to interpret the Bible doesn't have to weaken your faith. In fact, it can make it much stronger by forcing us to challenge our old assumptions. And that really just leaves us with one last question to think about. What assumptions have you been bringing to these foundational stories? And what new things might you discover if you decided to take a fresh look?